The Supreme Court set oral arguments for Brown versus Board of Education of Topeka for December 9, 1952. The question before the court: were segregated public schools legal under the 14th Amendment, which guarantees equal protection of the laws for all citizens? Led by Thurgood Marshall of the NAACP, the team of lawyers prepared for their day in court.
These were giants. These were civil rights giants that were strategizing and helping each other see how the case would go.
Representing the opposing side, attorney John W. Davis had argued more cases before the Supreme Court than any other lawyer in the 20th century. He maintained that running schools was the right of states, not the federal government. Separating schools by race was legal, as long as equal facilities could be provided. NAACP lawyers argued that separate meant segregated, and that the whole purpose of segregation was to ensure inequality. When states enforced segregated public education, they were denying African American school children equal protection of the law. 6 months passed. The court, deeply divided, issued no ruling. Lawyers on both sides re-argued the case in front of a court that now included 2 new justices. May 17, 1954, nearly a year and a half after initial arguments, recently appointed Chief Justice Earl Warren read the decision in open court. Does segregation of children in public schools solely on the basis of race deprive the children of the minority group of equal educational opportunities? We believe it does. We conclude unanimously that in the field of public education, the doctrine of separate but equal has no place.
That was one of his great contributions to this country. He was able to get the Supreme Court to render a unanimous decision on probably the most controversial issue before the court in this century.
This was a landmark decision. For the first time, it overrode the states on the conduct of the public schools, which had been up to that time considered a local matter and with entirely outside the jurisdiction of the federal government. The Brown decision, it changed the whole balance of power between the federal and the state governments.
The Supreme Court had acted as the conscience of the country. Brown fed a building momentum that would break open into a mass movement for full civil rights. Over the next 11 years, activists pressed to dismantle legal barriers to equality, and in the process, changed the face of race relations in the United States. Southern politicians reacted immediately to Brown.
The South will not abide by nor obey this legislative decision by a political court. Integrated schools are not desired by either race in the South. Education cannot thrive in a climate such as would result from the mixture of the races in the public schools. We will take whatever steps are necessary to preserve segregation in the South.
And in nearly every Southern city, businessmen and clergy organized white citizens' councils, pledging to stop integration.
All of this stuff is based on an illegal decision by the Supreme Court, which is based on an illegal amendment to the Constitution.
The showdown between state and federal power would come in September 1957 in Little Rock, Arkansas. Governor Orville Faubus called out state troops to prevent 9 African American students from entering Central High School. Reluctantly, President Eisenhower sent 1,000 federal troops to uphold the Constitution and to protect the students. But the crisis in school desegregation continued. Rather than desegregate, Virginia and Arkansas closed down schools. Then they used public funds to help support private white academies. Mississippi, Georgia, Louisiana, and South Carolina passed laws that prohibited integrated public schools. A full decade after Brown, 98% of Southern black students would still be attending segregated schools. Reversing more than a half-century of state-sanctioned segregation would require more than a Supreme Court ruling.
Well, let me put this as bluntly as possible. The charge has been made, and made by some fairly moderate people, gradualists you might call them, that the NAACP, the General Counsel you are, is moving too far, too fast. That following the decision of the Supreme Court, you would have been well advised to let things move along gradually for a while, that you can't overthrow the prejudices of 300 years overnight.
You can't, or maybe you can't, override prejudice overnight. But the Emancipation Proclamation was issued in 1863, 90-odd years ago. I believe in gradualism. I also believe that 90-odd years is pretty gradual.